Hello, I'm Cathy, and I was kicked out of my mom's anniversary dinner. My sister got the beach house, and I was told to leave. But that wasn't the worst part. It wasn't just the rejection or the betrayal. It was the truth they were hiding from me for years. And the next day, the shockwave hit. What they never saw coming. You won't believe how it all flipped. The atmosphere in the mansion was almost overwhelming. The grand chandelier above gleamed, casting a soft, golden glow over the marble floors. The lavish decorations, the ornate furniture, and the fine china screamed wealth in a way that made me feel both invisible and out of place. I adjusted my dress, a simple black number that I had bought at a discount store, and surveyed the room, watching as my family mingled with ease, dressed in their designer clothes and flawless smiles. It all felt so perfect. I wasn't part of the perfection, though. As I stood in the corner, nursing a glass of cheap wine, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Everyone else seemed so at ease, so comfortable in their roles. I looked around at my family, each of them with their own spotlight, shining brightly, while I stood in the shadow. I was the youngest daughter, the one who never quite fit in, the one who always had to struggle for approval. No matter what I did, it was never enough. Not enough to be seen, not enough to be heard. The older members of the family gathered in small clusters, laughing, chatting about trivial things that seemed so far removed from my life. My sister Victoria, effortlessly beautiful, was the center of attention. Of course, she was. She always was. She had everything. Perfect looks, perfect life, perfect marriage. And there I was, the other daughter, invisible in comparison. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished glass of the window. My makeup was fine, my hair done just right, but it didn't matter. No one saw me, they saw her. Victoria, my perfect older sister, the one who never had to try. She was everything I wasn't, and it ate at me, silently, relentlessly. I overheard fragments of conversations, talk of the house, the estate, the legacy that would be passed down. I wasn't part of those conversations. I wasn't even invited into the discussions. And I realized, with a cold and sickening clarity, that I never would be. As the evening wore on, I watched as the conversation turned to something more serious. My father, Mr. Keith, stood at the head of the room, looking every bit the patriarch, while my mother sat beside him, radiant as ever. The topic shifted to the inheritance from their late father. It was a family tradition to discuss who would get what, and I knew exactly what I would be getting. Nothing. Victoria, as expected, was getting the beach house, the coveted prize of the family, the house that held so many memories, the one I'd always dreamed of inheriting. But deep down, I knew I never would. It wasn't mine to have. I felt my chest tighten as my father announced the decision, with a smile on his face as if he was doing something noble. Victoria was the chosen one, the golden child. She would inherit the house. I glanced at her, and for the first time that evening, I saw something other than the usual air of confidence and superiority. A slight flicker of guilt. I'm sure it was nothing, but in that moment I felt a small glimmer of satisfaction. She didn't deserve it, I did. But as the evening continued and everyone cheered for Victoria's good fortune, my own inheritance was handed to me. A small token, a collection of old jewelry, nothing more. It felt hollow, like a cruel joke. My family celebrated her success, while I was left to swallow the bitter pill of my own insignificance. The weight of it all was too much. I could feel the sting of humiliation creeping up on me, but I refused to let it show. I took the small gift, forced a smile, and tried to look composed. But inside, I was seething. And then, as if to add insult to injury, my mother, my own mother, turned to me and said, "It's time for you to leave." Her voice was calm, almost indifferent, but the words hit me like a slap. Leave. As if I were nothing more than an afterthought, an inconvenience. I could feel my face flush with embarrassment, my pulse quickening as I fought to keep my composure. But I refused to show weakness. I stood tall, despite the crushing weight of humiliation. I wasn't going to let them see how much it hurt. They wanted to push me out. Fine. I would leave, but I wouldn't let them break me. As I made my way to the door, the words "leave" echoed in my mind. But there was something else, something stirring inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt before. I wasn't going to accept being invisible anymore. I wasn't going to let them define my worth. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the events of the evening still swirling in my mind. I had been humiliated, abandoned, and dismissed. But as I stood there, looking out at the grand mansion that had never felt like home, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let this be the end. I would take control of my own life, no matter what it took. And just as I was about to walk away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another meaningless notification, but what I saw made my heart skip a beat. The words, "Global Towers Acquisition Complete," flashed across the screen, signaling a change that I never could have anticipated. Something was about to shift, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of hope. This was just the beginning. The morning after the anniversary celebration was quieter than I had expected. The house felt empty, even though it was just me inside. The silence seemed to amplify the weight of the previous night's events. I stood by the window, staring out at the city, the cool air from the open window brushing against my face, but it didn't calm me. Instead, it gave me a sense of clarity. Yesterday, I had been humiliated, dismissed, told to leave by my own mother. But as I stood there now, something in me stirred. That raw pain had not faded. Instead, it was being replaced by something else. A quiet promise to myself that I would never let myself be invisible again. Never again would I sit on the sidelines of my own life, waiting for permission to matter. I had let my family define me for far too long, and last night had been the breaking point. For the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. But this wasn't about hope anymore. It was about taking control. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stop dwelling on the past. I couldn't change what happened, but I could change how I moved forward. The pain of rejection still gnawed at me, but now I had a plan. A first step towards my own independence. It was time to stop playing by their rules and start playing by my own. The next weekend was supposed to be another family event. I had received the invitation earlier that week, the usual email from my mother with the subject line, "Mom's Annual Gathering, don't forget." I had always gone, despite how miserable it made me. I was the one who showed up out of obligation, the one who smiled through the awkward conversations, and the one who accepted my place as the family's afterthought. But not this time. I hesitated as I sat at my desk, my fingers hovering over my phone. The idea of skipping out on yet another family event, of saying no to them, was terrifying. I was supposed to be the dutiful daughter, the one who always showed up no matter how little I was appreciated. But last night had changed everything. My decision felt like the first act of defiance I had ever allowed myself. It wasn't much, but it was something. With a small, almost nervous smile, I typed out my response. "I won't be attending this weekend. I've got other commitments." I sent the message before I could second-guess myself. My heart raced, but there was something liberating about it, something powerful in the act of doing something for myself, rather than for them. It was just one step, but it was mine. The days passed slowly as I began to reclaim my time. I took a deep breath and reshuffled my schedule to focus more on my career and my own well-being. I had always pushed work aside in favor of family obligations. I had always put myself last. But now, I was changing that. I was finally choosing me. The Global Towers project I had been working on was moving ahead faster than I had expected. It was a project I had quietly poured my energy into, always fearful of speaking up, worried that I wouldn't be taken seriously. But as I looked at the email updates on my phone, I saw my work starting to make an impact. The project was moving forward, and I was a part of it. That small sense of accomplishment settled in me like a calm after a storm. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to make me realize that I had something to be proud of, something I had created. It was my victory, and no one could take it away from me. As I finished the last email for the day, I left the office, eager to get some air. As I walked out of the building, I accidentally bumped into an old colleague, James. He had always been a supportive figure when I worked at the management firm, always encouraging me to push further, to take risks. We hadn't spoken in months, and his face lit up when he saw me. "Cathy, how have you been?" he asked, his voice warm and genuine. I smiled, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. We exchanged pleasantries before I mentioned the Global Towers project. To my surprise, he was impressed. "Wow, Cathy, you've really been busy, huh? That's fantastic. I always knew you had it in you," James said, his tone sincere. His words, though simple, meant more than they should have. I felt a rush of validation. For once, someone was seeing me for who I was and not for who they thought I should be. It was the first time in months that I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't just Cathy, the overlooked daughter. I was Cathy, someone who had made real strides in her career, even if no one else recognized it. "Thanks, James," I said, smiling more confidently now. "It feels good to be moving forward." That night, I sat down and composed a message to my family. The words felt foreign, but necessary. "I won't be attending any more family events," I wrote, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed. "I need to focus on my life, my career. I hope you all understand." I stared at the message for a moment, my chest tight with a mix of relief and guilt. It wasn't easy. Cutting ties with my family was something I never thought I would do, but after the way they had treated me, I had no choice. It was time to stop trying to earn their approval. I had to stop seeking their acceptance. I needed to accept myself, and for once, that had to be enough. I hit send, and it was like a weight lifted off my chest. The next morning, I received a text from my mother, one that made my heart sink. She was disappointed, confused, asking me what had happened. How could I turn my back on the family? How could I just leave them behind? The guilt rushed back, but it didn't drown me this time. I read her message, then put my phone down and took a deep breath. This was the reality of my decision. And there would be guilt, there would be backlash, but there would also be freedom. I was starting to let go of the past, starting to make decisions for myself, starting to take control. It wasn't easy, but I was getting stronger with each step I took. As I sat down that evening to work on a new business proposal, something inside me clicked. I was no longer the daughter who had to live in the shadow of her family. I was Cathy, a woman with her own dreams, her own goals, and her own future. For the first time in years, I was proud of who I was becoming. I wasn't where I wanted to be yet, but I was on my way. I glanced at my phone, seeing a notification from my lawyer. I opened the message and read it. The next phase of my business acquisition was moving forward. Another step closer to what I had been working towards. The thought of it made my heart race with both excitement and fear. Everything was about to change. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. And I wasn't going to stop. The morning after the family dinner, I woke up with a heavy heart. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time, just staring out the window. The events of last night, the cruel words, the subtle jabs, kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. My sister, Victoria, flaunting her beach house like it was the crown jewel of our family, the way everyone's attention shifted to her as if I was invisible. My family's favoritism had never been a secret, but last night had made it painfully obvious. It was like being in a room full of people, all pretending I wasn't there. They all played their parts, wearing their designer clothes and flashing their polished smiles, while I, the quiet one, was left to observe from the edges. A part of me always knew this was how things would be, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I thought about the years I had spent trying to fit into their world, always trying to prove myself worthy, always seeking their approval. It was exhausting. And no matter how much I accomplished, it was never enough. Victoria was the golden child, the one everyone admired, the one who didn't have to try. And I was the afterthought, the one who worked hard, who succeeded, but was never celebrated. I felt the anger rising in me, building like a storm I couldn't ignore any longer. I was done with being pushed aside, done with accepting the scraps. My family had made it clear they didn't care about me, but I was done letting them dictate my worth. As the day went on, I reflected on how I had been raised. It wasn't just the family gatherings that stung, it was the constant reminder, day after day, of how I had always been the second choice. The quiet one, the one who never got the attention, no matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved. I had always been dismissed in favor of my sister's charm and effortless beauty. It was like nothing I did ever mattered as much. The memory of my mother's face last night, when she told me to leave, still burned in my chest. That was the moment I knew. I would never fit in. I would always be the outsider in my own family. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was everything. It was the constant feeling of being overlooked, the years of watching my sister get everything handed to her without ever having to lift a finger. There had been so many moments growing up when I had tried to prove myself, my intelligence, my work ethic, but all of that was overshadowed by Victoria's effortless charm. It didn't matter what I did. I was never going to be good enough. But last night, something inside me snapped. I didn't have to accept it anymore. I couldn't keep silent, couldn't keep letting them push me aside just because I didn't fit their perfect mold. I wasn't just going to sit back and accept this. I had worked hard to get where I was, and it was time to make sure I was seen, whether they liked it or not. I had made a decision. The first step was small, but significant. I wasn't going to show up to their next family dinner. I had always gone, always bowed to their wishes, always put my family above myself. But not this time. This time, I was taking control. It was just one night, one event, but it was the start of something bigger. The thought made my stomach turn, but I didn't back down. I had always been the one to compromise, to bend to their whims. But now, I was going to make my own choices. I looked at my phone and sent a message to my mom. I won't be attending this weekend. I have other things to take care of. I didn't wait for her response. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. Later that evening, I sat at home, alone, feeling both nervous and empowered. I had skipped the family dinner, and though a part of me felt guilty, another part of me felt something I hadn't in a long time, relief. I was finally doing something for myself. But that feeling of satisfaction didn't last long. The next day, when I ran into my sister at the store, it hit me. She didn't even acknowledge my absence. She was too busy flaunting her new beach house as if it were her birthright. The way she spoke, the way she carried herself, it was all so effortless. And there I was, standing in the background, feeling invisible all over again. I had spent my whole life trying to measure up to her. It was exhausting. But then something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, make me feel like I didn't matter. Not anymore. I was done playing by their rules. I was going to play by my own. The next family gathering was upon me, and this time, I was prepared. When my father casually mentioned my small job and how I'd never have the luxury of the life they all had, I felt my blood boil. But I kept my composure. I didn't shout, didn't raise my voice. Instead, I calmly told them about the new investments I had made, things they had no idea about. I didn't just stop there. I mentioned the real estate deals that had been slowly gaining momentum. At first, they laughed it off, dismissing my accomplishments as nothing more than a fluke. But I wasn't going to let them brush me aside this time. I had worked hard for this, and it was time they knew it. I could see the shift in the room. The family, who had always dismissed me, suddenly seemed unsure. They didn't know how to respond to someone who had stopped asking for their validation. Then, just as I had made my mark, the phone call came. A business acquisition I had been working on quietly had gone through, and I now held a significant stake in the very beach house my sister had so proudly flaunted. I smiled to myself. They had no idea. The family was still reeling from my revelation, and I could see the tension in their eyes. I wasn't going to stop here. This was just the beginning. I had a plan, and with each step I took, I could feel the walls closing in on them, not me. As I left the family dinner, the satisfaction of my small victory lingered, but I knew this was just the start. I still had so much to do, so many more steps to take. But for once, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready for whatever came next. The following days felt like a slow burn. The family was beginning to notice the subtle shift in me. They were used to me being in the background, always playing the role of the quiet, obedient one who never stirred the pot. But something had changed. I wasn't the same person I was a week ago. I was no longer a silent observer. I was beginning to make my presence known, slowly and deliberately. It was at another family dinner, a week after the last blow-up, that the tension really started to escalate. I walked into the room, my back straight, my steps confident. Victoria was already there, of course, always first to arrive, always with her poised smile and her perfect little life. The beach house was being mentioned again, a topic that had become her weapon of choice. The family had now started calling her the one who made it, as if her life was somehow the pinnacle of success, all while she was completely oblivious to what I was quietly building in the background. "Still working that little job of yours, Cathy?" Victoria asked, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "I mean, it's cute that you're so independent, but you'll never have the luxury we have. I don't know how you do it." I kept my face neutral, but inside, my blood was boiling. This wasn't a simple comment. This was her way of reminding everyone where she stood and where I didn't. I took a slow breath. This time, I wasn't going to let her have the last word. "I guess it's all about priorities," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "While you've been busy showing off your new beach house, I've been securing my future, real estate investments to be specific. I've been putting my energy into something more sustainable." The room fell silent. The mention of real estate, a field that had long been dominated by my family, caught their attention. They exchanged uncertain glances. My sister shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control of the conversation, but the damage was done. After dinner, I decided it was time. Time to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. I found my father in the study, flipping through some papers. His face looked the same as always, stoic, calm, the kind of man who rarely showed emotion. But tonight, I wasn't here to get his approval. I was here to confront him. "Can we talk?" I asked, standing in the doorway. He looked up, a little surprised. "Of course, Cathy. What's on your mind?" "I've had enough," I said, walking into the room and sitting across from him. "Of the favoritism, of always being the second choice. I've done everything I could to fit in, to be someone you could be proud of. But all you've ever done is make excuses for why my sister gets everything and I get nothing." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Cathy, you know it's not like that." We've always tried to be fair. No, I interrupted. It's always been Victoria. She gets the house, the attention, the praise. No matter what I do, it's never enough. You made it clear to me last week when you told me to leave. You've made it clear my entire life. He looked away, guilt creeping into his eyes, but he didn't say anything. He never did. You've let her take everything from me, I continued, my voice growing steadier. And I'm done. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who'll never see my worth. For a moment, there was silence. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. I watched as he opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. You never had to work for anything, Cathy, he finally said, his voice laced with discomfort. Victoria's always been the easy one. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to admit the truth, I shot back, that you've always favored her. That I've never been good enough for you. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table, and I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from my real estate firm. The acquisition I had been quietly working on for months had just gone through. The beach house that had been flaunted in my face was now mine. I didn't smile, but inside, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. My sister had no idea what was coming. I kept my expression neutral as I looked up at my father. Funny, I said softly. I just got a confirmation on something. Big. I guess it's not as easy as you think. The tension in the room was palpable. My father's face went pale as he realized what I was implying. I stood up and walked out of the room, my mind already racing with the next steps. I had control now, and I wasn't going to give it up. The next few days were a whirlwind. I could feel the shift in the air every time I walked into a room. My family was beginning to notice the change in me. The quiet, overlooked Cathy was gone. In her place was someone who wasn't afraid to take what she deserved. My sister, for the first time, seemed to be looking over her shoulder, unsure of where I stood in all of this. She confronted me one evening. "What's going on with you?" she asked, her voice tight. "You've been acting strange lately. What's with all the real estate talk? What are you trying to prove?" I met her gaze, my calmness unnerving her. "I'm just securing my future, Victoria, something you wouldn't understand." She tried to dismiss me, but I could see the cracks beginning to form in her facade. She wasn't as confident as she once was, and that was exactly what I wanted. As I left the family dinner that night, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. I had done what I came to do. I had taken my first step towards something bigger, something that was mine. The family was still oblivious to the full scope of what I was building, and that was fine for now. I had the power, and soon enough they would all see it. I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. The days after that dinner were deceptively quiet. I kept to myself, quietly observing the shifts that were starting to take place. The business world that I had been quietly building was finally starting to show signs of growth. Each deal I made felt like a small victory, but the real challenge was in the family. My sister Victoria could feel it. She didn't know the full extent of what I was doing, but she could sense something shifting. The calm before the storm was here, and I could feel the walls closing in. I knew my time was coming. The family, once blissfully unaware of the slow-moving changes in me, was beginning to notice. Victoria's bravado started to crack, and her ego, built on years of being the golden child, was beginning to crumble. She might have had the beach house, but she didn't have the quiet power I had just started to accumulate. The next family gathering was inevitable. It was Victoria's favorite moment to shine, and I could already feel the tension in the air before I even walked through the door. The words would be sharper this time, more pointed. But I was ready. At the dinner table, I could see it in her eyes, the jealousy, the insecurity. It wasn't enough to be the perfect daughter anymore. She had to remind everyone that I wasn't on her level. I watched her smile sweetly as she took a jab at my lack of ambition, mentioning her latest acquisition, a luxury vacation home she flaunted every chance she got. You know, Victoria began, her voice dripping with feigned concern, it must be hard for you, Cathy, working your small job, trying to make a name for yourself, while people like me actually get things done. She paused, letting the words sink in. I let her words linger in the air, but I didn't flinch. No reaction. The room quieted, and I could feel all eyes turning towards me. I kept my cool, not allowing her to rattle me. Not this time. Actually, I said, my voice calm, but every word cutting through the silence. I've been securing some properties lately. Investing quietly, you know. Not as glamorous as a vacation house, but it pays off. Maybe you'll see the returns one day. Her smile faltered, just for a second, but she quickly recovered, turning to the rest of the family, who were now starting to look at me differently. There was a quiet ripple in the air, a shift in their perception. They hadn't seen me as anything but the quiet one for so long, and now they were beginning to see something else. After dinner, my phone buzzed. The notification made my heart skip. It was confirmation. My latest real estate venture had just closed, a deal worth millions. I sat in the quiet of the living room, pretending to listen to the chatter around me, but inside I felt a rush of satisfaction. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the numbers on a screen. It was about what this meant. I wasn't just quietly building my future anymore. I was standing up, claiming what was mine, and no one, not even Victoria, could stop me. She was still talking about the beach house, her pride shining through every word, but all I could think about was how, in a few months, it would be mine. I didn't have to tell anyone yet, but the game had changed. The silent battle was now fully underway, and I was winning. The next few days were consumed with work. I wasn't just making money. I was changing the entire power dynamic in my family, one quiet move at a time. I knew the land my sister had long considered hers, the properties that my family had neglected for years. I was securing them, one by one. The shift was so subtle that no one would notice until it was too late. Victoria had always thought she was untouchable. She thought the beach house was the peak of success. But I was playing a different game, one she hadn't even realized was happening. I didn't need to brag or flaunt. My moves were deliberate, calculated. I was taking control of the very things she had once taken for granted. She noticed, though. I could see it in the way she interacted with me now. There was a subtle unease in her demeanor, a crack in the perfection she had built for herself. She knew, on some level, that I was starting to take what was rightfully mine, and she didn't like it. I was patient, letting her sense the shift without revealing my full hand. I couldn't give her a reason to retaliate just yet. I had to wait for the right moment. Then came the discovery. It was a moment I hadn't expected, but one that would change everything. While going through some old family documents, I stumbled across something that felt like a bombshell. A file showing proof of my father's involvement in one of Victoria's recent financial decisions. A decision that was made with his influence, not hers. I sat there, staring at the document, a mix of anger and satisfaction flooding through me. This wasn't just about my sister anymore. This was about exposing the truth. The truth about how much of Victoria's success had been built on the backs of my father's manipulations. I hadn't known about this before, but now, with this proof in hand, I had something to hold over her. This was my leverage, my trump card. I had been patient, but now it was time to confront her. And when I did, there would be no turning back. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Victoria, suspicious of my newfound confidence, approached me directly, her usual smug smile replaced with something closer to frustration. "You think you can just come in here and take what's mine?" She spat, her voice shaking with anger. "You don't have what it takes, Cathy." I stayed calm, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me riled up. What's yours? The beach house? The things Dad's always handed you? I said softly. I'm not here to take anything from you, Victoria. I'm just here to take what's mine. She froze, her face pale. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of me. You've always had it easy, I continued, my voice steady. But I've worked for everything I have, and I'm done pretending I don't deserve it. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister didn't have a response. She stood there, looking at me as if she had just realized something she hadn't known before. I walked away, my heart still racing. But it wasn't fear I was feeling anymore. It was a quiet sense of triumph. I had finally stood my ground, and the family was starting to see me differently. The shift in the power dynamic was real now, and I wasn't about to stop. The calm of the morning hung in the air, but it was heavy with the promise of something inevitable. I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing everything that had led to this moment. The quiet success of my business ventures, the deals that were quietly building my empire, was starting to reach a crescendo. It was only a matter of time before my family noticed. They had no idea what was coming, but I could feel the tension building. Victoria, especially, would be blindsided. This wasn't just a battle of words anymore. It was about claiming my place. My father, though unaware, would be forced to see me for who I was. I wasn't afraid of the confrontation that was about to happen. For the first time, I was ready to stand up for myself. Not for their approval, but for my own dignity. I had spent my whole life in the shadows, hidden under the weight of their expectations. Now, I was ready to face them head-on. It was time to expose the lies, the favoritism, and the manipulation that had defined my existence for so long. I spent hours that morning staring at the evidence in my hands, documents, bank statements, and photos that told the real story of my family. The proof of my sister's financial dependence on our father, the unspoken favor she had always enjoyed, and my own silence. I had always been the invisible one, the one who didn't matter, the outsider, the one who had to bend and accommodate, but not anymore. The family dynamic had been broken long ago, but now I had the strength to tear it down, piece by piece. I wasn't doing this for approval. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone. I was doing this because it was long overdue. If I didn't act now, I would be trapped forever in the role of the overlooked child. And I couldn't live with that anymore. I thought back to my childhood, to the moments when I would sit at the table, unheard, unnoticed. The way I had learned to shrink myself just to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. I wasn't that person anymore. I had worked too hard for too long to stay quiet. The time had come. It was time to face my father, time to face Victoria. With a deep breath, I made my decision. The conversation would happen tonight. There would be no backing down, no more hiding. As I prepared for the confrontation, my phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. My stomach sank as I read her words. I've heard everything. You have no idea what you're up against, Cathy. For a moment, I wondered if she knew what was coming, or if she was simply trying to manipulate me into backing down before I even started. Either way, I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. Her message didn't rattle me. Instead, it fueled me. I could see through her now. The game she was playing, the control she tried to maintain, it all seemed so hollow. She had nothing left to threaten me with. I was ready. The family dinner that night felt different. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. Victoria was more obnoxious than usual, trying to impress everyone with her latest accomplishments. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. She made a pointed comment about my lack of direction, as if it was some sort of insult. Must be nice to just live in a small apartment and not have to worry about anything bigger, she sneered, casting a glance at me over her glass of wine. Her words hung in the air for a moment, but I didn't react. Instead, I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but steady. Actually, Victoria, I've been making some moves in real estate. Not as flashy as your vacation homes, but it's paying off. I could see her flinch, the words hitting harder than I intended. The room grew still, the family members starting to realize there was something more to me than they had known. For years, I had been the quiet one, the invisible one, but that was changing. Victoria laughed, trying to brush off what I had said, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. She could feel the shift, and I was just getting started. Later that evening, as the tension at the dinner table simmered, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was the confirmation I had been waiting for. A deal I had been working on for weeks had finally closed. The news was enough to push the power shift even further. I didn't show my hand. I didn't react. I simply let the moment pass. But inside, I felt a quiet victory. I was finally free of the weight they had placed on me. This was mine, my hard work, my determination, and now, my success. Victoria had no idea how much control I had quietly gained. She had been too focused on her beach house, too secure in her assumption that she had it all. The game had changed, and she had no idea. The following days were a blur of deals and decisions. I wasn't just accumulating wealth. I was carving out my future, step by quiet step. Properties that had once belonged to the family, properties Victoria had long claimed as her own, were now mine. I wasn't going to announce it to anyone. I wasn't going to boast. But I knew. I knew that when the time came, when everything fell into place, it would all come crashing down on her. But I didn't move too quickly. I had learned patience over the years, and it was patience that would win this battle. Victoria noticed the shift. I saw the way she started to act differently around me, the way her smile no longer reached her eyes. She could feel it, even if she couldn't name it. The power was no longer in her hands, and she hated it. Then, the bombshell dropped. While reviewing some old family documents, I found something that made my heart race. Proof of my father's involvement in one of Victoria's recent financial moves. This wasn't just favoritism, it was a deliberate manipulation. I sat with the document in my hands, staring at it. For so long, I had suspected the truth, but now I had it in black and white. I wasn't just going to confront my sister, I was going to expose her. I had the leverage I needed, and I was going to use it. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my father. He knew something was coming. I knew he did. But he didn't know how much. The confrontation came. Victoria was waiting for it. I could see the tension in her eyes as I walked into the room, the calm before the storm. She tried to smile, but it was strained, forced. She was ready for a fight. "Do you think you can just waltz in here and take everything?" she spat, her words sharp. "You don't have what it takes to take what's mine." I stood there, calm and unflinching. "What's yours, Victoria? The beach house? The things Dad gave you?" "You think that's all there is?" I could see the shock in her eyes, the realization that this time I wasn't going to back down. "I've earned every single thing I have," I said quietly. "You've had everything handed to you, but not anymore." Her mouth opened to respond, but I cut her off. "It's my turn now." And just like that, the final piece fell into place. I walked away from the table, my heart pounding, my mind racing, but I didn't feel fear. I felt free. I had made my point, and for the first time in my life, I knew that I had finally taken control. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My heart was steady, but my mind raced. This was it. The final confrontation. I had come so far, and there was no turning back. My father, Victoria, they all thought they knew me. They thought they could push me down, make me invisible. But not anymore. The years of being overlooked, the quiet sacrifices, the simmering resentment, it all came down to this one moment. I took a deep breath, adjusting my shoulders as I straightened my back. My words had to be clear, firm, and unyielding. No more manipulation, no more pretending. It was time to take back control. It was time to show them who I really was. The calm before the storm felt heavier now. The silence, thick with anticipation, held the promise of what was to come. This wasn't just a family dinner anymore. This was the battle for my future. I walked into the family home, and it felt different. The air was thick with the usual unease, but today I wasn't the nervous, overlooked daughter. Today I was something else, something they hadn't seen before. Dad and Victoria were sitting at the table, waiting for me. The same smug expressions, the same dismissive air. They probably expected me to fall back into the same old pattern. But I wasn't the same. I started with my father, my voice calm but unwavering. "I've been silent for far too long," I said, meeting his gaze. "But you've always ignored my contributions, haven't you? You've always dismissed me. It's not just about the money or the business. It's about the way you've treated me." I paused, letting the words sink in. Dad shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. But I wasn't done. I slid the envelope across the table to him. "I've made my own plans," I continued. "I've already secured my own financial future. I'm not reliant on you anymore." His face changed in an instant. The mask of control slipped. For the first time, I saw him unsure, caught off guard. He didn't know how to respond. The power had shifted, and he knew it. This wasn't just about money. This was about finally taking control of my life, reclaiming what was mine, and demanding the respect I deserved. It was a power move, and it had worked. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched the scene unfold. The look on her face said it all: anger, disbelief, and the unmistakable feeling of someone losing their grip on everything they thought they owned. She couldn't take it anymore. Her voice cut through the silence. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands? You think this is all about you?" She sneered, clearly rattled by my strength. I didn't flinch. I wasn't backing down this time. "You've always tried to manipulate the family, Victoria," I said, my voice steady. "You've always undermined me, taken credit for my work, and made sure you were always the golden child. But I'm done playing your game." Her face flushed with fury. "You've always been jealous of me," she shouted, her voice rising. "You can't stand that I've had everything handed to me." "Really?" I shot back. "Because I remember a time when you couldn't do anything without Dad's help. You've always been Daddy's little girl, haven't you?" I pulled out the documents I had prepared, the ones showing how much I had contributed to the family business. "You've had the luxury of being the favorite, but I've been building my own success. I've been doing the work while you've been riding on the coattails of our father's money." Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. This time, I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative. The battle between us was escalating, but I wasn't the timid, invisible sister anymore. I was standing tall, fighting with everything I had. Just as the argument seemed to hit a deadlock, I made my move. I had been saving this for the right moment. I pulled out the document I had found, the one that proved my father's plan to transfer the family assets exclusively to Victoria, bypassing me entirely. The document he thought he had hidden so well. I dropped it on the table in front of him. "Here's the truth," I said. "You've been planning to leave me out of everything. I've never mattered to you, have I?" My father's face drained of color. He looked at the document, then back at me, his eyes widening in realization. He didn't lash out, though. Instead, something shifted. For the first time, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. It wasn't enough, but it was there. This moment wasn't just about the property, the money, or the assets. It was about finally demanding the respect I had been denied for so long. It was about me taking control of my own life. The final confrontation was now in full swing. Dad tried to downplay his actions, as he always did, claiming that everything he did was for the family's best interests. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I stood my ground, calling him out on the decades of favoritism, the manipulation, the way he had allowed Victoria to control the narrative. This isn't just about the money, Dad. It's about the way you've treated me all these years. Victoria tried to get the last word in, but I wasn't having it. This time, you don't get to silence me. The words felt like a release. A weight that had been pressing on me for years was finally lifted. I wasn't the passive, overlooked daughter anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I was standing up for myself. Dad finally spoke, his voice softer than I expected. I didn't know it would come to this, he admitted, though it was too little, too late. But it was a step toward recognition. It was the first time he had acknowledged my efforts. I looked at Victoria, her smug expression faltering. You can't manipulate me anymore, I said. I've fought for everything I have, and I'm done playing by your rules. And with that, I walked away from the dinner table, knowing I had made my point. As I left, the weight of the moment hit me. The battle wasn't over, but I had won the most important fight. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer the child who had to bend to their expectations. I had reclaimed my life. The war wasn't over, but this was my victory. I stood at the edge of the family property, my gaze fixed on the house that had once held everything I thought I had lost. The place that had represented so many years of pain, frustration, and silence now stood as a symbol of my triumph. I could feel the weight of the past pressing on my shoulders, but this time, it didn't weigh me down. It fueled me. This was the end of that chapter, and the beginning of something new. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the final conversation, the conversation that would change everything. This wasn't just about settling old scores or demanding what was rightfully mine anymore. It was about stepping into my future, one I had built on my terms. I called the family together. This would be the final time we met in this way, and I wasn't going to let it pass without laying everything on the table. Dad and Victoria walked in, expecting the same quiet, submissive daughter they were used to. They didn't know me anymore. The woman who sat at that table was different. I started with Dad, not with anger, but with calm, unyielding resolve. You've ignored me for years, I said. You've silenced me, dismissed my efforts, and tried to erase my contributions. Well, I'm not staying silent anymore. Victoria tried to jump in, defending their actions. You never wanted to be part of the family business, Cathy, she said, her voice laced with venom. You chose to be invisible. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the evidence I'd gathered over the past few weeks. Emails, contracts, recordings, proof of my dedication, proof of my work. I've been more involved than either of you ever realized, I said. You've been ignoring my contributions for far too long. I could see the look on their faces, Dad's disinterest, Victoria's disbelief, but they were starting to realize something. This time, I wasn't backing down. I was in control now. The confrontation escalated as Dad tried to deny his role. He claimed everything he did was for the good of the family, but I wasn't buying it anymore. You've used your power to exploit me, I said. You've let Victoria take all the credit while I've done the work. I've always been left behind. Dad became defensive. You don't understand the decisions I had to make. Everything I've done for this family. But this time, I didn't let him hide behind his excuses. I pointed out the financial discrepancies, the times money meant for me had been redirected, how my inheritance was manipulated. Why were you so blind to what I was doing? I asked. Why did you allow Victoria to take everything I worked for? Dad's face turned pale. For the first time, I saw him rattled, unsure of how to respond. The truth was out now, and there was no hiding it. The power had shifted, and I was no longer the invisible one. Just as I thought I had him on the ropes, Victoria fired back, furious and desperate to regain control. "You've always been jealous of me," she accused. "You think you're entitled to everything." I wasn't interested in playing her games anymore. "No, Victoria," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not jealous of you. I'm not fighting for your approval. I'm fighting for my place in this family." She sputtered, trying to defend herself, but I pressed on. "Let's be clear. You've manipulated Dad, taken credit for my work, and tried to erase me. You don't get to play the victim here." She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't having it. "I have the proof right here. I've worked just as hard, if not harder than you, and I'm done pretending I haven't." The air in the room grew thick with tension as Victoria realized she couldn't talk her way out of this. The power shift was undeniable, and she had no choice but to face it. Then, the bombshell. Dad dropped a confession I hadn't seen coming. "I favored Victoria," he admitted, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and regret. "But I never thought you would stand up for yourself. I thought you'd always stay in the background." I wasn't sure if I was more shocked by the admission or by the fact that, for the first time in my life, he was acknowledging the truth. But I couldn't afford to be emotional. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "I don't need your approval anymore, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I've built my own life, my own future. I'm not here to fight for your validation." I looked at Victoria, who was now trying to salvage whatever control she thought she still had. "You can have your legacy. You can keep your wealth," I continued. "But it's no longer mine. I'm done." The room was silent for a long time. Victoria tried to argue, but it didn't matter anymore. I had made my decision. I didn't need their wealth or approval to feel fulfilled. I had already created my own path, and I was taking it. I turned to Victoria one last time, not with hate, but with quiet strength. "You've lost your grip on me. I'm not the sister you can manipulate anymore." She tried to apologize, but I didn't need her words. I didn't need anyone's validation anymore. I walked away from the table, leaving the past behind. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about me, my future, and finally standing on my own 2 feet. As I stepped outside, I looked back at the family house one last time. It had been the source of so much pain, but now it was just a chapter in my story. A chapter that was over. I had taken control. I had reclaimed my life. My future was waiting for me, and for the first time in years, I was ready to face it, on my own terms.